South Africa's financial and capital markets are lauded by indices the world over. However, the country is also considered to be the most unequal society in the world. The Economy On Your Doorstep probes the reasons for this paradox of South African life to explain how economic actions frame the lives of South Africans in a transitional society faced with the challenges of unemployment, poverty and inequality. Author Ayabonga Cawe joins us for more. Aya, thank you so much for your time. I mean, when one reads the book, I mean, the first part starts off with a look back in history. Talk to me about the importance of understanding the economy of the reserves for you. Why did we begin the book there?
Afternoon, Natasha, and afternoon to the viewers of On Point. I think for me, the reason why the book had to start there was the functional role that many of the homelands played in the late 19th century, but also in the 20th century in South Africa. If you think about, even to this day, the massive surge of people who leave many of our urban centers to effectively go home, and I use that in inverted commas, that still speaks volumes about how persistent an institution migrant labor is. And the roots of migrant labor in this country result and arise from effectively the decimation of the ability of people to sustain their livelihoods in what later became the native reserve. And so that's a starting point, because in many ways, those are the areas that underperform on all development indices. It might be access to minimum standards for children of school-going age. It might be the level of value added in whatever manufacturing that might exist or not exist in many of those areas. By all accounts, by all indicators, many of these areas in the provinces of the Eastern Cape, Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, and other parts of our country continue to lag behind from a development perspective many of the other urban areas. And a big part of the value created in South Africa continues to be created in the urban areas. And I think we continue to see this in the data as recent announcements from Stats SA indicate.
Based on that then, I mean, when you think back to the July riots and some of the issues and the themes we were talking about there when we were reacting to it, never mind the guys who were stealing the TVs and various other things, but there were people who were taking, basic necessities. What does that say about the way we've been able to deal with mass participation in the economy and how we kind of having some hits and misses here and there?
Look, I think, in many ways, these are structural issues. They're not issues that are brought about just by COVID-19 or brought about, by the global financial crisis or the inability of the South African economy to grow due to frictional issues that have to do with the business cycle. These are baked-in features of the South African economy. And it's an economy that for much of the 20th century linked notions of citizenship to one's ability to participate in the labor market. But we also know, Nastasia, that the development of global production networks and capitalism more broadly now allows for accumulation and the creation of profit as a critical incentive for undertaking enterprise, allows for all of those things without need for expanding employment of warm bodies, of humans, of people. And in many ways, that then leaves us with a South Africa that is deindustrializing, is seeing increasing levels of unemployment, but increasingly is also seeing levels of significant discouragement, people no longer undertaking the job search. And a big part of resolving that has to do with trying to deal with issues of asset transfer, minimum income support, all of the things that will ensure that you really give people alternatives outside of the labor market in order to improve whatever reservation wages they might want in the labor market. And reservation wages, to put it simply, is just the wage beneath which it wouldn't be worthwhile for you to wake up every single day and go to work.
How should we be thinking about the idea of the basic income grant? Because on the one hand, people say it hurts the credibility of fiscal policy, but on the other hand, there are people who are still living below the poverty line.
Indeed, I think you're right, Nastasia, that it's not in any way a simple debate. I think we mustn't try to oversimplify what might be complex, even in that discussion. But the basic income grant is but one instrument in a broader discussion we might want to have around comprehensive social security. In a context where you've got a massive gap of people between the ages of 18 and 59, out of no fault of their own, who are unable to participate in the labor market. And so in a sense, I guess, the debate is still at a level around whether or not this should be preferable or whether or not it's something we need to do. And I think that the issues you're raising around, the credibility of the macro-fiscal framework have a lot to do with policy design. How do you design the basic income grant? How do you finance it? What become its constituent component? Is it just a cash transfer? Should it have a combination of non-cash options? And in the book, I talk through what I think, in the sequencing of this intervention might be helpful, not only to make sure that you subsidize the income and consumption baskets of poor households, but what you're also trying to do is to make sure you're building capabilities, you're building the basis for economic participation in many poor households. And I argue that the non-cash component can play that role. If you're able to tie that provisioning system with local production. So it might be saying a component of that grant must be spent on products that are produced at a minimum necessary scale within, say, 200 kilometers of where that grant is being given. And the idea there is to make sure that you don't have the situation where the grants end up reinforcing production, distribution, and value chains that are concentrated in the urban areas, while effectively displacing informal and other formal producers in many parts of this country that have been deemed peripheral areas. And we've seen this, with many social grants issues, be it the CPS matter, or even now where and whether or not we track what it is that is being spent by many households who are benefiting from the existing programs that we have.
Ayabonga, unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I would have loved to talk to you about, your ideas and how you're thinking around, socialism and state intervention in the economy and, the kind of feedback you've also gotten from the book. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but that is Ayabonga Cawe.